There's no better way to have trust than through people, which is creators. So the key thing here is let's talk about the money, because opportunity, risk, et cetera, it always comes down to the money, and we're just gonna go there. One of the important things is how partnerships are structured, and we've had a lot of conversations about the different kinds of partnerships, and I'm gonna ask Becky to kind of lead this off from the agency perspective. What does that mean for creators? What should they be thinking about in terms of their partnerships, either with an agency or with a brand like Lipton?
It's so hard. Everyone wants to productize payment. They want to say, you're this size, you're this creator, therefore you fall in these brackets. One of the things that I always have a bugbear within this industry is always trying to say, this type of campaign is always going to cost this much, and limiting the creator's ability to say, actually, this is my creative process. And for me, the cost is X. It's a freelance industry. So if I were to have an opinion on creators talking about payment structures for these deals, it's being very clear and like what goes on behind the work. What do you put into this from a time perspective? Do you have a team? Because some of it might literally just be a day in the life that you can do very quickly, and that's fine. Other times it might be that you are getting help. Someone's going to help you do the editing. You're going to get someone to do your color grading. And I don't think brands always understand the lengths of some talent will go to produce something they're really, really proud of. So for me, if creators want to have more empowerment around their payment structure, yes, you want to talk about results and audience and what engagement, but also share the process that goes into that, because the productization of it, sometimes we just assume you're picking up your phone, snapping a picture and sending it off saying, do you like it or not?
Well, but that assumes that the creators are aware that they need to communicate their process. That assumes that the agency is having a conversation with the creators. That also assumes that the brand is willing to listen. Yeah. So we do have a bit of an echo chamber about how these deals get done. And there's a huge difference between being a long-term ambassador or doing quick, always-on content. And I know, Victoire, that's something that you have spent a great deal of time with your brand setting up in terms of the process so that you get better work. But there's a bit of a communications challenge in terms of understanding and empathy on all sides and with platforms. So let's start with creators. Let's start with you guys. What do you wish brands understood about your process and about how you can do your best work?
I feel like for me, I will often get deals in, often the more one-off ones where it's like, okay, we need this filmed in 3 days. It has to be by this deadline. There's no moving. And then you're not able to do your best work because you don't have the time to sit there and think about how this can be best on both parts, how you can get the best out of the content you create, and they can in turn. For me, I recently did something that had to be filmed within a few days, and I did it, but I did get my friend who's a videographer to be a part of it. And I didn't really communicate that I was going to do that, but the response was, all approved. I was like, okay, but I spent the whole day filming this. I also had a videographer. You know, it's that extra level, and it's not that it always has to be like that, but I think that would be so much of a better relationship between brands and creators when there's an appreciation. I think it's like once the video is done, the job is done, and that's it. It becomes quite transactional. There's no kind of empathy sometimes within it, and I get that because it's like you're just trying to get things done as quick as possible, and it's not always in your control. But in turn, it means that the experience isn't really as enjoyable and fulfilling as, you know, it's exciting working with these brands. It's like a dream to work with these brands that you've always loved, but then it means that the actual experience from start to finish ends up being a bit kind of half-hearted and a bit disappointing because there's no real like, well done, you know, there's no like, you know, validation that you've done good work when you have.
Well, I just did a new study with the Harris poll, and 85% of creators say they never hear back from brands any feedback. And so I know that that's challenging, that in terms of maturing the industry, but there's practicalities. And Victoire, as a brand, how can you build in time? Because not all brands have time to give feedback. Not all brands have time to give you, if you have a product launch and you need a creator, the nature of being creators is that you do this quickly. you guys are as fast as you possibly can be. It's the creators love it. So what do you think? Like, there's a practicality about all of this. What's to be done?
Well, I think for me, I prefer to work on long-term partnerships because then you actually have the time to foster those relationships. I prefer to work on like 6 months or 12-month long partnerships because I understand we're all busy, especially a lot of brands, how many creators are you working with at one time? There are a lot of us sometimes, it's not just... Exactly. There's not just always one. So that's why I prefer the longer ones because then it means that you start working and then you kind of communicate, what your process is. A lot of people know that I have my studio and so they take into that to account. But then it also means that maybe on month 2, you go for lunch, and then you talk about, your life and you get to know the brand a bit more and they get to know you. So then the next time the content comes around, the next round of content, it's much smoother, By that time, you know what the brand expects. The brand knows what you can deliver, and it becomes a much more smooth process. By the end of it, I don't even mind if a brand just says, all approved, great, because I know that I see them in between, when it's a longer partnership, you make time to foster the relationships. And that's why I appreciate the one-off job, absolutely. But I really do, I love people and I love meeting people and I love actually being, even almost like friends with clients, because I think that's the best way to get the most out of a partnership is when there's that human connection. So I think if more brands could do longer term partnerships, maybe even with a bit less creators to make it more feasible, I think that's a great way so that each party knows what to expect.
So I'll be a little provocative here. Sure. That doesn't sound very practical from a brand perspective. That's a challenging thing. And so I totally understand. So it is being, for virtue of being provocative, how can you expect a big brand with, millions of dollars invested to be able to give you a one-on-one kind of an experience?
Well, I've had it. So I've done it with Pandora, which is the biggest, jewelry brand in the world. I've done it with Grey Goose, which is also a massive brand. So and Very in the UK as well. Those are 3 long-term partnerships that I've had over many, many years, and these are massive brands with huge teams. But it means that, maybe some of their employees are dedicated to certain creators, so there's always someone available to us. So I'm sure that even maybe with smaller brands, it might not be possible. So maybe, it also depends on the objectives, right? I think some brands want just content. Some brands want clicks, maybe if there's a product that needs to be launched and they need a high volume of sales, maybe finding someone for a one-off job who they know will get, millions of sales or whatever it is that they need, maybe that would be good for that one. But a lot of these brands want brand awareness or content, and it means that if you're working with a creator whose content you know and love and can rely on, then that's a great way to meet those objectives.
I wanted to jump on your point about 85% of the brands who are doing branded content with creators don't give feedback. From where I sit, I feel like a lot of brands actually don't even know sometimes what they want out of these creator partnerships, and which is why they don't necessarily give feedback, because they might not know if this was good or bad because they haven't benchmarked or put proper KPIs in place, to your point. And as you said before, we still very much in the creator economy is booming, but it's still very new. Life is long, right? It's only been 5-6 years that we're thinking about that. And I also think that for people who are sitting on the brand side, they want to deliver quick results to their leadership. And sometimes that means I just need to get this done quickly. I've been working with the same creator because I know that creator will deliver against the results that I think my leadership wants to see, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing, if I may.
Is it Snap's responsibility, or is it your responsibility as an executive that is trying to help build this industry to guide brands? Who helps brands do this?
I do think our agencies or our media partners play a really big role in that, because you might have no one on the brand side that's really upskilled already, right? But then you have people on the brand side, especially the younger people. Like, we have a lot of Gen Zs coming in the workforce. They spend all of their time on TikTok and on Snapchat and on Instagram and every single social platform. They can also teach the leadership team. They can demonstrate a lot of things. But I do think things need to change quite rapidly in the way that we as brands think about creator marketing, because you think about traditional campaigns, we will be planning them out at the very least 18 months in advance, but most often 24 months out, right? Which is a crazy amount of time. And then you're like a month before the launch and you go, oh, shoot, I need some influencer marketing in there. Can you create this in about 24 hours? And I have zero time to update you on what the campaign is or what my brand is. And I really think we need to, if we're going to invest in creator marketing, the reality is that creators bring something that traditional advertising really doesn't. But it doesn't mean that it can be done overnight, because there's a huge job to be done from us as brand to tell you what our brand is about, you know, and what is our message. So we need to reframe the timings. And one thing that we've done also differently, so we have an inter-agency team. So we have a lot of different agency experts that sit on Lipton Iced Tea. There's a weekly 1-hour call between all of our agencies. And $1 Billion Boy is part of that interagency team, because it's super important that regardless of the type of campaign that we're developing, we have the voice of the creators at the table. And that's something that we've recently implemented actually in our ways of working. And it's already changing so much the way that we're planning out our timelines. So we started planning out our big creator campaign of 2025, which is going to roll out probably from mid Q2 next year, already from about 6 to 8 weeks ago. So that's just to explain how we're really making that change as well internally.
Could I add something? I think there's something around this industry is working with people. And I think the advertising world has traditionally worked with real estate. And we keep applying the same rules of, okay, last minute campaign.
What do you mean by real estate?
Real estate is like a billboard or a TV ad or hiring a studio, hiring an extra. And I always say all the time, creative marketing is people, not a product. It's a skill, not a product. And we need to think about redefining the rules in a totally different way. And sometimes I don't think, and you use the word empathy, and I think you also use the word empathy. We lose empathy in it because rightly so, it's advertising, and we have to think about efficiency, the teams, the processes. We want to be slick, but the product is people. And I think we lose that a lot of the time, specifically as we get with scale. But I also think conversely, there are so many different types of partnerships that are had and should be had. There are some creators that their only job is very passive small deals, but they actually earn a good living off that. And they don't want to do the ambassadors, or they don't have the time or the passion for it. So I think there's something around managed expectations that goes back to creators and brands. Like, this type of deal, what can you expect and should you expect? Is this actually like, this is great for you, creator, because it should be a low lift, you're getting, more money in the bank, and it's going to do some awareness for us? Or this is a type of partnership where, as a brand, we're actually going to expect a lot from you, and therefore, should we have the empathy that we should give more back to you? Because that managed expectation on the different type of partnership between both sides, I think, will make everyone feel like a much more like holistic type of way of working in this industry.
So let's get specific, right? Because people listening want to learn, and this is all great. And I love this very esoteric kind of a conversation. However, have you had a client that you had to say, no, you can't do it this way? Have you? Yeah. Let's get specific. Can you give us an example? You don't have to tell us the name, but it would be great if you did.
I've had clients where I've been really disappointed, where I've had to go around to creators' houses because the brand, and I'm not going to say who, but they were asking this creator it's their face, it's their livelihood, it's their heart, it's their passion, it's who they are that they're putting out for this big, big brand. The brand is sat in a massive office, they've got lawyers, they've got managers, they've got all this protection. And there was some online backlash going on. And I felt terrible for this creator. They were really struggling. And I spoke to the brand. I was like, I think we might need to think about taking this ad down, or you should come up and speak out on behalf of this creator. And they're like, no. They didn't see the person. And I ended up going around to that creator's house because I felt mortified that they had taken on this deal. They'd committed themselves to this. And that moment actually changed my whole trajectory in this industry and why we now work so hard to give back to creators. And now I'm very clear and direct with brands. Like if I see them start to think very product-y, like, it's just a transaction, just give me this, I don't really care about you afterwards. I'm very clear on saying these are people, not a product.
And Nikki, that's your platform. Yeah. And in your content, in your life, how are you helping your brand partners and everyone else bring the humanity back to this business?
I think it's so important for brands to respect and put emphasis on what your unique USP is. You know, you want to feel like they're investing in you as a person and they've chosen you for a reason. A lot of what I talk about, kind of like I mentioned, is inclusivity and things like that. And I've had brands where sometimes I do a lot of makeup and I'll show a product and it may be flipped backwards in the camera. And so I'll supplement this by saying, okay, I can do a close-up of it. But I've had brands say, oh no, can you just flip the video? And normally, okay, that would be fine. But I have a medical condition on one side of my face. If I'm flipping the video, the side of my condition is changing. And so it's little things like that where things that may normally be okay to kind of just don't apply. And so I think for me, it's, you know, teaching brands that there's sometimes a different way of working, or, you know, there's been times where I'm not well. I have a medical condition and I completely get that there's deadlines. But if I have an emergency hospital appointment or something happen, I do. And I think it's so important for a brand to be receptive to that and not say, okay, well, when's the next possible time? You know, when can you next get this? Because, you know, I'm already stressed enough and I completely get it. There's contracts signed, things like that. But in turn, it means that then I'm kind of stressing frantically to get this video done. And on both parts, it's not, you know, there's not going to be a good outcome. And so I think for me, personally, it's, you know, hoping to teach brands a little bit more about that not everyone's situation is the same and we're all human, whether there's a medical condition or not involved. You know, we're not machines. We can't drop everything we're doing and just fulfill the work. And so for me, it's especially in a specialized way saying, guys, I'm not feeling well today, I can't get this to you. And I think for me, it's kind of trying to show brands that it's important to, again, have more understanding, you know?
Okay, so we've gone through calling out bad behavior. Let's go to optimism. So learning, empathy, not just copying people, knowing what you're asking for. So those are some very big topics. Becky, I know that you at the agency are having an initiative to really try to bring all of this together. Can you take us home with a little bit of an explanation?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier there's this moment where I saw this creator having a really tough time and there was no empathy. And that moment, I say it was about 4 years ago. And since then, I've been really passionate about we've got to do something that actually flips the power dynamic and starts to invest more and more in the business of creators. So we launched a venture called 529, and it's about empowering the hobby hours, the passion hours, but to become your main 9 to 5. But the reason why we did it, and I'd say it's a mission, is because we've seen that this chasm between, because it's for brands and creators, but it's designed for the needs of creators. The chasm that's happened where brands have kind of forgotten and commoditized people. It's like we've got to push this together, but we've also got to start pouring power into creators via education. Because if there's better managed expectations, if creators can actually know their rights within this, if they have learned how to articulate, actually, this is the production process and I'm going to let you know it. And that's why I am the way that I am. And I charge the way that I charge. The job is to kind of all these problems, they're really actually education issues. So that's our hope, because what Victoire is doing with the fashion brand to me is signifying this next step. And I want us as an industry to stop talking about authenticity and stop training people on the fundamentals and start embracing, because that is peer-to-peer almost with the creator. That's two powerful IPs meeting together. And I think the education piece, if we can get that right and solve it, we can keep doing things like what Lipton Iced Tea are doing.
So I'll ask this. Who's educating the brands? Where does that come from? Because we
all are. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's all of our responsibility, is to have those hard conversations. And we do have bad actors. There are people that may be in a position to say something on all sides. Is there sort of a civil rights bill? Is there a constitution? Is there a UN that we need? Is there a union we need for creators and brands? Is there more conversations? Take us out with your thoughts. Why don't we start with you, Julie?
I mean, there must be some organizations that are looking after the integrity of how brands are working with creators. And if not, we should probably think about it. But I think in every single country, US or in every European country, there are organizations that are making sure that at least that product placements are legal, that they're transparent, and platforms are also taking that responsibility by adding features that indicates to the consumer that this is a brand partnerships.
Maybe find smart lawyers who are out there
I just
on both
feel like
sides.
it's everyone's responsibilities, and also for us at the platform, we also make sure that there are no misleading ads coming from creators. For example, on Snap, you can't have gambling ads. Obviously, you can't, talk about drugs, alcohol, and all of that, because we want to protect our users, and they can be as young as 13 years old. So I think it's a collective responsibility, and it's only going to get more institutionalized as the economy gets bigger and bigger.
And Victoire, I'm going to put you on the spot. You need to go out and train brands. You need to be our ambassador.
I mean, I would. No, I'm joking. But what we're doing to educate, I think, both sides of the industry and also the agencies. I mean, these guys are phenomenal, but I think a lot of agencies also need to be educated on this. But we've actually brought creators as creative directors on our brand. And that is an excellent way of closing the chasm, as Becky's saying.
I love that. Well, we're at time. We could do this all day. Thank you so much for participating, everybody.
Thank you, Jamie.